Welcome to the Federal Youth Network virtual series. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you are on as well. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote by the questions you like. You can vote, for the questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. Please note that this session will also take place in French on another link at 2:30 p.m. Veuillez noter que cette session prendra place en français à partir d'un autre lien à 14h30. This is the first event of the Get to Know Your Team series, during which we will explore ways to engage individuals and create stronger, healthier teams using a variety of tools. Today, we are joined by the Flex GC Network, and they will share their most popular tools and explain how you can use them to enhance teamwork, job satisfaction, and productivity. Without further ado, I will pass off the mic to Javaria, who will be our moderator for today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Javaria. My pronouns are she and her, and I will be your moderator for today's session. I just wanted to start by wishing everyone a happy Asian Heritage Month. I'm also based out of Tkaronto, so this is the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick polling questions. This is not a test and absolutely not mandatory, but we would love for you to participate. So first question, does your team have a team charter? Second, are you familiar with the products that Flex GC offers? You can say yes. Have you used them before? Have you not heard of them? Are you entirely unsure of what they are? And the third, are you comfortable expressing issues concerning team dynamics with your team? You can say yes, that you've done it previously, no, because you find it very difficult to push for these conversations, and absolutely not, I am terrified of conflict. So we can wait a minute or two while everyone puts in their answers. Okay, so the results are in. So for the first one, most people are entirely unfamiliar. I think 50% of people said no, which is crazy. So thank you for joining us. Second, are you familiar with the products that Flex GC offers? Majority of the participants said no, I have not heard of them until today, with 6% saying yes, I love them. And then the last one, so question number 3, are you comfortable expressing issues concerning team dynamics? Most people are kind of hovering between yes, I say what I feel, and no, I need a push to have these conversations, so that confidence factor. So thank you all for your engagement and participation in this poll. Today, we have the pleasure of having Paul Keller and Tina from Flex GC. So I invite them to introduce themselves and start the presentation.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having Paul and I here today. It's our absolute pleasure. So my name is Tina Varvaresos. I'm currently a change management advisor working for the Government of Canada. I am a Flex GC contributor for all things communications and product design. And I would like to note that I am located in Montreal, which means I am located on the traditional unceded territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation. Also, please note I am recovering from a cold, so I'm a little scratchy today. I don't normally sound like this, I promise. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Paul.
So, hi, everyone. Paul Keller. I'm a policy analyst at the National Regional Federal Council Secretariat. Many of you maybe don't even know what that is. Basically, each region has a federal council that's comprised of some high-ranking executives. So I support all those councils in all the regions except the NCR, of course. I'm in on the traditional territory of the Wendat Hurons as well. So fun fact, Varia was talking about that being the case in Toronto too. So the reserve is here in Quebec City, actually. I was Also at the CRA initially, co-lead of FlexGC right now. Also worked at the Innovation Lab at the QFC, the Quebec Federal Council. So we can move on to the next slide, talking about who is FlexGC. So we're an unofficial grassroots network working across the Government of Canada. We believe the future of work is flexible, and our objectives are to support GC public servants. This has been the case since April 2020, when the pandemic hit. We amplify best practices. So whatever good is out there from the GC, we'll gladly share it. We conduct research, so 2 surveys that we've done until now with 3,500 respondents, conducted in order to inform our products and services, but also, everything pertaining to the future of work within the Government of Canada. And we do develop partnerships, notably with the Federal Youth Network, but also with the National Managers Community, and some ED&I networks as well, such as RAN, and voila, we can move over to the next slide. And this is Tina, so go ahead, Tina.
Thanks, Paul. So like Paul mentioned, folks, a lot of what we do is in the realm of supporting public servants and best practices. And if you've attended a Federal Youth Network or a FlexGC event in the past, you've probably heard about us talk about the 13 factors of psychological health and safety in the workplace. That is the prime example of some really good best practices that are being shared across government today. And in the context of team charters and user manuals, they are super important to consider because these are factors that you can include in your discussions as an individual employee and in your wider discussions with your team. So having a quick peek at these 13 factors, I won't go through them for you. There is a link attached, and I can see it's been dropped in the chat, so I encourage you to visit that on your own time. But look at these factors, and I want you to really critically consider which one of these are important for you in the context of your workplace, especially for folks who are now hybrid and finally engaging maybe with their teams for the first time in person. So for me, for example, I really prioritize psychological support, organizational culture, and I really value growth and development as a young federal public servant. So as you peruse these, most of you mentioned you're not actually familiar with our team charters. So you'll see how they factor in a minute. It kind of eliminates the whole spiel I had ready for you. But basically, all of these factors can show up in a team charter and even in your user manual. So hopefully you guys like the tools we bring to you today, but you'll see later in these tools, it's an opportunity for you to define how you want to work, what you value, to level set this understanding with your team and to really build that team-wide shared understanding of what your culture might look like. And fundamentally, these 13 factors can play a huge part in, fostering the culture you want to see. So when building your team charter, which we'll talk about in a minute, you really want to consider which of these 13 factors you value. So if you don't know where to start, look at this list and see, okay, do I value workload management? Is work-life balance really important to me? Do I value psychological support? So you can take all of these and kind of work to shape, either as an individual or with your team, the workplace that you want to see. So it's important to note here, not everyone has safe workspaces, and that's okay. And as we move on to this discussion of team charters, I really encourage you, if you want to advocate for any of these factors in your workplace, only do so if the space is safe for you. If you don't have a team that offers you a safe space to talk and to share your own user manual and to engage in discussions about team charters, obviously, please don't put yourself in harm's way. But if you're in a good team that really values, psychological health and safety, then bring these factors to the conversation if and or when you choose to talk about team charters and user manuals with your team. So I'll hand it off to Paul now, if we can head to the next slide.
Perfect. So when we're talking about a hybrid work model, it's important to find purpose and to generate positive experiences. So I'll just read the statement here. In a hybrid work model, we must use the office as a tool and be intentional and empathetic in our approaches to ensure positive experiences and sound change management. So where employees work both remotely and in the office, it's crucial to view the office as a tool and not just a physical space. So when we talk about intentionality, what we mean is the importance of considering factors like collaboration, social connections, service delivery, project requirements, and other personal circumstances. So as we navigate this transition to hybrid, it's also important to be empathetic towards our colleagues and their unique circumstances and needs. So by being mindful of the diverse experiences and preferences of our team members can ensure a smoother transition and foster a sense of inclusion. So by approaching this transition with empathy, can create a supportive environment where everyone feels valued and included regardless of their work location. And most importantly, let's remember that this is a journey of learning and adjustment for everyone. So we should be open to feedback and continuous improvement, refining our approaches to ensure a positive and successful transition for our organization and its employees. Now you'll see here we've got our two main tools that we'll be talking about today. So the Who I Am tool, which is also known under the name as a user manual for me, or user guide for me, depending on who you ask. The source of information is actually from a blog post from a woman named Capsy Robinson that was shared very widely, and then the QFC's Innovation Lab created a product that's pretty user-friendly, and so that's what we're sharing in our team charter kit. And then there's the actual kit itself, which we'll look at later. We have 6 documents within that kit, each of which are important, but we'll run through that later on in the presentation. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Paul. So now we can get to the fun stuff and the stuff that's a little bit more tangible. So like Paul mentioned, some people call this, a user manual. Some people call it the user guide to me. Whatever it is, this is basically a document that you can use to really establish the baseline of who you are as an employee, how you like to work. It's a really great tool that you can bring with you as you change jobs. You can update it as you move through life. And it's a really good way to set a baseline understanding of who you are as an individual and how you like to work within your team. So for some folks, it's a really helpful tool for setting professional boundaries. I really like mine to set boundaries as to how I work, how to communicate with me. It's really helpful, especially most departments. MS Teams is pretty new. When I started in 2019, we did not have Teams. So a lot of folks, I feel like, are still learning boundaries about how we use Teams, cold calling versus not, etc. So, if you're the type that really does not like to get cold called, you can put that in your user manual. It's also a really great tool to advocate for yourself. So, if you're neurodiverse, if you have specific ways of working and learning and just interacting with people, you can kind of put it in your user manual. And it's a great way, especially if you're uncomfortable. I don't think it's conflict. I don't think it's ever a fight. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes it is a fight, but it shouldn't be a fight for you to say, hey, this is who I am and this is how I work. But if you're uncomfortable with that conversation or your work environment isn't safe, this is something that you can do and you can share, in person, behind the screen with your management team to say, hey, this is what works for me. This is how I can be successful. I would appreciate your support. So up here, we do have the one that the QFC now uses. There are a ton of different models online. This one might not work for you. I know my team where I work has a separate user manual, but use it basically to put whatever you think is relevant. You can put, if you prefer taskings via email, or if you prefer, I like MS Teams for this. I really like collaborative brainstorming sessions, or I like co-working over Teams. Whatever it is, you can list it. And it's a tool to serve you. So you can put as much or as little information on it as you want. But I really encourage you to think of it as like one of the best tools you can have in your arsenal, especially as a new and or a young public servant, as you're kind of learning how to navigate this world. And this is really, really nicely complemented by our team charters, which, if we can move to the next slide, Paul will be talking to you about.
Sorry, and I do see those comments in the chat regarding access to the documents. Don't worry, we'll make sure that you gain access. Perhaps you're not registered to GC Exchange. I strongly recommend that you do get registered. If not, we do have these available on Google Drive as well. So we'll share the links. I don't know if there's going to be a follow-up email after this presentation, but we'll make sure that everyone has these in their possession. Concerning the benefits of a team charter. So first of all, talk about setting clear team expectations. So by defining the team's purpose, goals, roles, and responsibilities, basically clarifies what's expected from each team member, reduces ambiguity, and promotes alignment towards a common objective. Second point, improves team collaboration. So by outlining how team members should work together, communicate, share information, promotes a cooperative environment where individuals understand their contributions and actively collaborate to achieve shared goals. Then third point, promotes cohesion. So by fostering a sense of unity and togetherness among team members, it outlines the team's values, shared vision, objectives, creating a common identity and purpose. So this promotes cohesion and a collective commitment to success. After that, it enhances accountability. So across your team, by explicitly defining roles, responsibilities, and expectations, it helps team members understand what's expected of them and holds them responsible for their commitments, leading to improved performance and results. Encourages feedback by creating a safe space for team members to provide input, suggestions, and constructive criticism. Regular feedback loops established in the charter promote continuous improvement and growth. Afterwards, fosters a sense of community. So by emphasizing shared values, norms, and goals, promotes a supportive and inclusive environment where team members feel valued, respected, and connected to their colleagues, leading to higher morale and engagement. Reduces confusion and conflict. So by providing clear guidelines and expectations, helps prevent misunderstandings and promotes a shared understanding of how to address issues, facilitating smoother team dynamics, and finally provides a reference point for decisions in conflict resolution by outlining agreed upon principles and processes, ensuring that decisions align with the team's goals and values. Once again, in case of conflicts, the charter can be used as a guide to facilitate resolution and maintain harmony within the team. So those are the benefits of a team charter. We can move on to the next slide. And basically this right here is the contents that's available on GC Exchange. Like I said, also available on Google Drive. So the first document is a Who I Am template from the QFC's Innovation Lab, the user guide to me. Then we've got the actual FlexGC team charter template, which you'll fill out. There's a list of questions in there that the team answers. And then you use the answers to fill out the actual charter. We'll have a look at that in a few minutes with the special activity we have planned for you. We have a sample email invitation to participants. So whoever is leading the actual exercise, because we do recommend that there be a project lead for this, either one or two people that want to take charge of, actually facilitating the workshop and preparing for the activity. So they're supplied with a sample email. We've got a self-reflection exercise, which basically combined with the user manual to me will let folks, think about their own preferences prior to the activity. So it's important, a very important exercise. I facilitated these team charter development activities several times. And my best experiences were when folks did their homework beforehand. When they showed up without having done the self-reflection exercises, it was very difficult to conduct this activity and have actual meaningful conversations. So we do recommend that there's time given for this particular part of the exercise. Then afterwards, the fifth document, team charter whiteboard whiteboard template. So this is something that you'll upload to an online whiteboard that you'll use to basically insert different ideas within. And finally, I'd say the most important piece is the Team Charter Workshop Playbook. You'll notice within that particular document, earlier we talked about the 13 factors of psychological health and safety. The first question that a team needs to ask themselves before doing this exercise is, are we in a safe space? Because if not, then you won't be able to have these meaningful conversations. You'll have some pain points that won't be discussed if people aren't comfortable discussing them. And so really important that folks do their homework to find that safe space to then go towards this particular exercise. So voila, maybe move on to the next slide, which is our activity. But before doing so, would like to maybe throw it out there and see if what we have in the Q&A so that we can answer maybe a few questions. For the rest of the presentation, we are going to be doing this activity together, but I'd like for it to be dynamic. So if people have questions, we'll answer them, and we'll kind of show you a little bit how the exercise works, but also want to make sure that we answer all your questions. So Javeria.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm just looking at the Q&A to see what's been most voted. So keep on voting if you want the question answered. So first, I'm the most junior member of my team, and I seem to be the only one concerned about enhancing hybrid/remote team practices and overall culture. Do you have any tips for breaking the ice?
Breaking the ice. Baby steps, of course. When you're a junior, you come into a place where there's an ingrained culture. It's not easy. So you have to find creative ways of getting people involved. I saw some questions earlier regarding Microsoft Teams, and the use of it. The person, if I'm not mistaken, was saying, people are sometimes change averse. So how do you get folks to get on board with, this type of exploration, right? So perhaps, in the actual charter, we have roles and skills, right? What are our roles and skills? And maybe one of the roles and skills in there is having an IT tech savvy person who's in charge of exploring and training and, bringing things to the group to try. But we also need to be mindful of, where people are at, right? Because we all have a set of paradigms, of course, ways that we've worked in the past. And so changing that can sometimes be uncomfortable. And so we kind of have to be super empathetic towards those people as well, right? So you'll have super tech savvy individuals who are willing to try all sorts of new things, and others who are just not comfortable with technology, right? And so how do you find a common solution? You have to kind of meet somewhere in the middle. And so the tech savvy person will need to be empathetic, and the person who's not comfortable will need to take risks and try things. And if you verbalize within your team that it's okay, right, to make mistakes, it's okay if you're not comfortable, because that's something that we'll see often as well, as people won't be comfortable and they won't want to talk about it because they're just self-conscious and ashamed. We could even go as far as saying that. So we kind of have to be empathetic and try to meet halfway, if that makes sense. Tina?
If I can hop in too, kudos for you for being a junior member and, trying to enhance these best practices. My 2 bits here would be, one, make sure you're documenting that, because that's a leadership initiative. Just because you don't have the title of leader doesn't mean you're not a leader. So keep notes of those little initiatives just for your own career development, because that does matter. And the second thing I would say is just sometimes the easiest way to break the ice is to just over communicate. So if this is something that's really important to you and you really do want these best practices in your team, just consistently explain your why. Hey, I'd really love to do this because X, Y, and Z. I think it's important because of this. Be willing to champion it. So, we have this team charter kit that has all these instructions for you. Please feel free to take that and say, hey, I think this is really important because of X. I would love to take the lead on it. And, you have all these tools now at your disposal to help you do that. And then to Paul's point, just empathy, this is a huge adjustment for a lot of people. And it does take a long time to, learn whether or not best practice works for you, because best practice isn't necessarily best practice for everyone. But don't be afraid to continuously experiment with it, as long as you're communicating with your team why you want to do it and why it's important. And, more often than not, if you take the time to explain it, I think people will be open to it.
I think that was beautifully answered. And as a junior analyst myself, I definitely feel the same way about the reluctance to change in our organization. So really good question. Can I ask another? We're good to, yeah. So second question, I understand that FlexGC really geared up when the pandemic began. What has FlexGC noticed over the past few years? Really good question.
Paul, do you want to go first?
Well, I'd say you go ahead, since I did and I'll compliment afterwards.
Sure. So one thing I will caveat and say is I think FlexGC is really uniquely positioned just because there are a lot of regionally located employees in the network. So we're actually quite tuned into the concerns of regional peeps and not just necessarily folks in the NCR. One thing I will notice, like most of us know, is that a lot of people became very comfortable in this new flexible way of working. And a lot of folks, a lot of people lost things, but a lot also gained work-life balance, people's health. Like you see so many people now walking on their lunch hours, working out, exercise, like it's fantastic. One thing I will say is, although I think for the most part, folks without kids at home, I'm saying this as, I'm married without children. So my reality is very different than Paul's, who had kids. But I think a lot of folks, for all the gains they made in work-life balance, they did lose a certain sense of boundaries in terms of, a lot of folks have work phones at home now. So it's really, really easy to check your email and to check your Teams after hours, because it seems really harmless. But I think what a lot of folks have come to learn now is that it's not actually harmless and you're constantly connected. So folks, while they can appreciate full-time work from home, they are, it takes a lot of work to implement those boundaries. I think another thing we really noticed is that, at least in my experience, I can't speak for all of FlexGC, but a lot of the folks that I have spoken to in my capacity and the presentations I've done, people's values have really changed. A lot of people, there are less folks, I think, concerned about climbing the ladder and more concerned about, like, is my workplace empathetic? Do they support me as a person? Do they offer me work-life balance? And, does this work fulfill me? And I think that has been really, really beautiful. Like, folks are motivated, by their interests now and by what a job can offer them personally and professionally, not just necessarily by the salary scale or the title. But I'll hand it over to Paul to see if he has anything else.
Yeah, so I think the pandemic probably played a role in that. It's also a generational issue, where and this is, has been researched where, the newer generation doesn't put as much importance on the initial salary, right? It's work conditions. And a perfect example of that, I worked with the Justice Department, and we were in a sort of like a job shortage, super difficult to recruit people, but the Justice Department says we have no problems right now recruiting lawyers. And why is this? Because they don't want to go work in a firm for 80 hours a week anymore. Right. So working within a government context is all of a sudden interesting for this type of professional. Right. What we've noticed, of course, Tina talked about us getting comfortable. Of course, when we started working remotely, we sort of had to get used to it. But eventually we did succeed in creating, team cohesion. And I say we. Obviously depends on the team, but many people were able to leverage technology and be intentional in their communications, right? To be able to build that team cohesion even at a distance. And so lots of people were able to make that work. And, that's still the case for certain individuals who are still working in a dispersed team model, right? Because we have heard stories about, since the directive to go back to the office 2 days a week, there are some folks who are going to an office where their team is not located, right? So they still need to keep those good habits of communication, and so I think that's something that the pandemic helped develop for sure.
I think the pandemic definitely shifted my priorities, that's for sure. Third question, is that okay if I, yeah. So this one is also one that I can relate to. One of my greatest challenges is engaging with my team that is in an office and myself from home. So this individual is in a different city. My team has the necessary tools such as Teams, but these tools are new to them. So there's that resistance to change. If we can review some tips to overcome these challenges, it would be helpful. So kind of similar to the first question.
Yeah, so obviously training is of the essence, right? Tina talked about it earlier as well, like communicating why, why it can be more productive to use a certain way of communication. Personally, I'm not very good at managing my emails, and it's actually anxiety inducing. And so if I can communicate in Microsoft Teams, I will do so immediately. Sometimes I'll see, folks starting some email ping pong, having a conversation by email. I'm like the first to scratch that and go into Teams and like, okay, so regarding the email, and then, so like just using different tools for different reasons. And you'll try things and quickly realize that it maybe isn't the best option, right? So the importance of revisiting solutions that have been chosen by teams. So you'll try something as a team, and then afterwards, making sure to get feedback on what went well, what's not going well. Is there certain functionalities that people don't understand? If so, is there training available to help them out with that? So making sure that, again, we talked about this earlier, being empathetic towards all different personas, all different user personas in terms of using technological tools is of the essence.
And I will just add, user manuals can be a really great tool for that. You can't always change other people's behaviors, but you can kind of set a boundary. For example, if you're having issues with how folks on your team use Teams, because they're resistant for whatever reason, use your user manual as an opportunity to say, hey, my preference is X, please send me taskings via email. And, consider, you can always suggest, like, it sounds really silly, but you can always suggest training. There are trainings on like email management. CSPF has one, or, Teams, or just general best practices. And when in doubt, you can't, like I said, you can't change other people's behaviors, but don't let anyone's lack of knowledge or lack of awareness step all over what you want either.
Still more for one more question? Yeah. Okay. Okay, this one's a good one as well. I feel like that a team charter needs to come most often from management. Is that not correct? I'm currently not in a managerial position that I can get this going. What are your suggestions to start something like this?
I'll tackle this one first. So I think I said it earlier, but you don't have to have the title of leader to be a leader. And you're right, it should come from management. Theoretically, your management should be the folks that are implementing this and trying to build that culture from the top down. It's not a perfect world. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. So in that case, like, it's totally within your right to approach your management and say, hey, I think, I just heard of this tool. I found this toolkit. I think it would be really great for your team. What do you think? And like I mentioned earlier, if there's not necessarily like a managerial appetite for that, offer to take it on yourself. And again, keep note of that. Those are that's a leadership activity, and you're being a leader even if you don't have the title, and that's something you should be proud of. And it'll help you grow as an employee. But you're right, it should come from management. But that's why FlexGC has created these tools so that we can equip you even when your management isn't.
Yeah, and right before we switch over to our concept board activity, so we have 10 minutes left, and I really want to show folks that tool. You have to be careful, it's a collective exercise, right? And we mustn't forget that. Obviously we've got a project lead, right? One or two. But it's a collective exercise, and actually when sharing this kit with I was talking to someone, and it's a team leader. It's like, you're right, I should create a team charter, and note the word I should create a team charter. And so this person was suggesting creating a team charter without involving the team in the process, and obviously, if someone were to do that, you can't get your team's buy-in if you go that route. So you got to make sure that everyone's involved, and obviously, pitching this idea to your team leaders. Hey, I think or manager, saying, I think it would be really, really cool if we did this. If you're okay with that, I can take the lead, or keep you informed on where I'm at, and explore this and come up with a plan. And the person might be overwhelmed by work and all sorts of other for all sorts of other things, and might be really happy that someone take the lead. So I totally suggest doing that.
I think you folks are ready to start your concept board. Thank you for answering all of our questions. It was very informative. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure that the links will be up to date so folks can reference all this information later on.
Perfect. So I'm going to share my screen here. I see that there are folks in the concept board. I believe the link was shared. So we're talking about digital tools earlier. This one is super interesting, and this here is the actual template that we have in our kit. So basically, we've got several sections, core values. While Tina was talking about the 13 factors, I think that a few of them could definitely make their way into here. So be mindful of that, and creating a mission statement for your team that you can put here. And then afterwards, the 6 other sections are basically linked to a list of questions here at the bottom. And that document's available as well. This is actually the team charter template itself. So the objective is to basically go through these questions as a team and answer them as a team during the activity. And then eventually, remove these questions and put statements instead. So this particular question I find super, super interesting. What tasks and activities need to be synchronous? So where we are engaged at the same time, and which ones can be asynchronous, can be done by team members at different times. So obviously what this question will answer, if we go back to the slide on intentionality, that we shared earlier, and finding purpose, and using the office as a tool. Well, obviously, you'll want to do synchronous activities as much as possible when you're in the office with your team, right? And whatever can be done asynchronously, you can do on a day in the office where folks are not necessarily around, or you can do from home. So that's the kind of question that we'll answer. What are the core collaboration hours of our team when team member availability is expected? So what core hours do we want to use for team meetings, and what others can be used for focused work for individual purposes, right? So those are just examples of questions, and obviously we could go through them. We don't have much time, so I won't go through them all. But I did want to show you this particular tool and how to use it. This is Concept Board. Basically what we'll do is create sticky notes, right? So in the top center, you can grab a sticky note and use that, and then basically just put in whatever idea you have. So how and when will we work? And so you'll go through the questions at the bottom, right? Just navigate here. How and when will we work? So we'll say, for example, that meetings will be in person. And sorry, I'll just reduce the font size here. Meetings will be in person when possible. So this is just a statement example, right? So folks will be able to put all their ideas, and the facilitator will basically go through all the ideas that people will have posted in this board, right? And have a discussion with the group regarding these statements to basically find consensus and create statements that everyone agrees with, or you know, that most people agree with and that others have conceded to agree with. So we'll go through the exercise in that manner. What's cool about this particular tool is that it gives a nice space for introverts. You know how in meetings sometimes we'll have people who take a lot of space, which is okay. They're extroverts. They like expressing themselves. Others will need to spend more time in thought and will have more calculated responses. And so this particular kind of tool will give space for that type of individual. And so it sort of enhances the brainstorming, the brainstorming effectiveness. And so we'll go through the exercise and usually we'll spend an hour doing this, and afterwards we'll have a board that is populated with all kinds of ideas. We'll go create the team charter document within the template based on all those ideas. So create a kind of synthesis on everything that's been discussed. And there can be another round of editing after that's been done. And eventually, once everyone's given their okay, we end up with a final team charter that you can revisit periodically. We suggest doing that every 3 months, every quarter. Just to make sure that everything's working smoothly. But, you know, that is the gist of the activity itself. So I don't know if there are any questions regarding this particular tool in the Q&A or regarding the exercise itself. But we might have, what, two minutes to answer any questions? Trey is not there anymore. I'll go and have a look myself. Bear with me.
Paul, I think we might have till 2:30. I know you and I had a 1:15 to 2:15 on our calendars, but I'm pretty sure we do have till 2:30.
Okay, because I'm doing the French session after, and I think it's starting at 2:30.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry, I was just having tech issues. I could not open the camera.
All good. So, yeah, go ahead.
I can continue with a few questions. I know some of them are really good. Someone asked, how is the team charter used after it is created? What would be some examples? What would be some example scenarios where referring to the charter would be helpful?
So in my experience, the process is much more important than the final document itself. And obviously, you know, because during this process, that's when the meaningful discussions happen. And if, say, you know, you're working as a team, and then at one point, you know, something comes up, a conflict regarding a particular way of working or something, and then what you'll be able to do is, oh, well, let's go have a look at our charter. What does it say, right? And then you'll have a look at the charter and use it as a guideline for making decisions. And that's not to say that nothing will come up that perhaps you won't want to change the charter, you know, depending on something that's come up, right, within your group. If ever you find an instance where the charter is not adapted, right? So, but then that'll give you a cue that you need to, you know, add an element or explore something in particular. And so that's basically how it'll work. But like the process is more important than the product, and the product should be revisited every 3 months or so. 3 months, 6 months, but that's like super, super important in this process.
Tina, did you have any additional comments?
No, I think Paul nailed it on that one.
Okay, that's great. Someone asked about the length of time that it takes to develop something like this. Like, what would you associate with how much time to allocate?
Yeah, so we need to take up to an hour for the self-reflection. And then the actual exercise, it can be an hour as well. But like that in my opinion depends on the group. I know that we've sort of over time decreased the amount of time that we recommend taking. But you know, sometimes it can be a lengthy process, especially if we're having difficult conversations. So being open to being flexible in that regard. But like again, you've got elements that'll come out in the board, of course, and that board is basically your source of information afterwards. And you take what happened during the activity and you synthesize on paper after the activity. The objective is not to end up with a final product during the workshop itself. So there's work to be done afterwards.
Thank you for the answer. I'll pass it off back to Finn.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Javaria. Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Paul. And thank you to all for joining us today. If you loved this session and would like to see it again in French, please note that this session will also take place in French on another link at 2:30 p.m. So in about under 15 minutes, we'll do it again, but in French. Veuillez noter que cette session prendra place aussi en français à partir d'un autre lien à 14h30. Resources will be available on the wiki page, and the recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel. So have a good rest of your day, and thank you.